Thank you, Ryan. I'll share my screen. And if you can just confirm to me that you are able to see my deck, then I can get us started.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Very happy here today and to have the opportunity and the invitation from the BrightBridge team to talk to you about our Zone apps. This is the agenda for today. So first of all, let me give a quick introduction on myself. So my name is Jurian van Maanen. I am the VP of Sales for the EMEA region at Zone&Co. And this is what I'll be presenting to you today. So I'll start with a quick introduction, so a little bit of a background about Zone as a company. We'll talk about what it is, what we mean with native suite apps, and then I'm going to dive into a live product demonstration of two of our apps. So we're going to be looking at ZoneCapture, and we're going to be looking at ZonePayments. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A. So please, if anything comes up during the session, feel free to use the chat. And at the end, Ryan will go through some of those questions as they come up. So let's start with a quick introduction on us as a company, Zone&Co. So Zone&Co was founded back in 2013, and it was founded by two co-founders who had worked at a large software company in the US using NetSuite, and there they got a lot of experience with software processes, and they decided to use their knowledge to also help other software companies. And what they found is that during those implementation projects, they ended up doing some customization from time to time for their customers, and mainly around the billing processes of those companies. And they thought, well, there must be a better way to do that than to do that on an individual basis every single time. So in 2016, they became an SDN partner of NetSuite, meaning that they can develop applications for NetSuite. And in 2018, they launched sort of a standard product to handle the things that they were encountering in those projects. And that became Zone Billing, really the flagship product of Zone&Co, aimed to give customers the ability to handle very complex billing scenarios straight in NetSuite. After 2018, they really had rapid growth, and in 2021, they received an investment from Insight Partners, one of the largest VC companies out there. And one of the main objectives there was to also use that investment to really increase the product portfolio, but also to increase the international reach of the company. And in 2022, they acquired a company called Fast4. That's also where I came from. Might be a name that is sort of more recognizable for some of you on the call today. And the apps of Fast4 became part of the Zone&Co portfolio. To complete that timeline, in the course of 2022, there was another acquisition where Satori became part of the Zone family. Satori focuses on BI and offers a native integration with NetSuite and Microsoft Power BI. So what is our mission in life? I won't go through all of this, but to summarize that, what we want to do as Zone&Co is help make life easier for finance team, and then specifically finance teams using NetSuite. So we are a company, we have over 200 people working for us, a lot of sort of real NetSuite experts, a lot of accountants as well. We serve over 1,000 NetSuite customers around the world. We talk to them, we try to get a sense of, hey, what are areas in NetSuite where maybe you could use some additional functionalities. And we develop native applications on top of NetSuite to help those finance teams with those requirements. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background of what exactly do we mean with native suite apps. So I think this is a slide that sort of summarizes that quite nicely. I think most of the people using NetSuite will have seen this image before. It sort of shows all the different things that NetSuite can do, from financials to inventory management. But NetSuite, or part of NetSuite, is also the Suite Cloud platform. And the Suite Cloud platform allows customers to build extensions on NetSuite to customize the system. But it also allows other partners like ours to really build additional functionality on top of NetSuite. So we really plug in, we build that functionality within the core of the NetSuite application. And yeah, that's really great. Like if you look at these screens, but we'll also look at that during the product demonstration later on. The beauty of that is that for a general user using NetSuite, they really don't know where sort of the standard NetSuite functionality ends and what is part of that native application that we add to the system. And that we really believe that using that native capability offers a lot of additional benefits, because if you're looking for things that NetSuite cannot do itself, you could also work with an external application, you could build integrations. But we particularly think that building those native functionality is really strong. And I tried to summarize that. Like my first draft of this slide, I think I actually had like 10 or 15 things that I think are really good about it. I tried to narrow it down to sort of the four main things that I think make that really strong. The first one is you have an all-in-one solution. So financial users tend to be really familiar with NetSuite. They don't need to learn a new platform. They don't need to have separate logins. They don't have to deal with complex integrations. All that functionality is part of that core system they are already using. It's very efficient because it's part of your core ERP. We utilize a lot of setup that's already there in the ERP. And for a lot of our apps, it's also really quick. It's a really quick path to value. Now, we also have some more complex application where you still have some implementation around training and figuring out the exact processes. But especially also for the apps we'll show today, it's really quick and fast to install those. You can be up and running in a matter of weeks. It's secure. Like we don't have our own infrastructure that we have to maintain. It's all part of NetSuite. NetSuite has a fantastic security. Usually customers who purchase NetSuite will have already gone through entire technical reviews, and all of that we utilize also with our application. And it's unified. And what I mean with this is sort of everything that we add with our apps, it becomes part of that NetSuite database. So specific data that you're storing in fields or records that come from what we added to the system, you can also use in all the other areas of NetSuite. So in your reminders, your dashboard, your reporting, which has a great benefit. So this is our family of applications, and today I'm going to focus mainly on ZoneCapture and ZonePayments. A couple of words on the other applications. Zone Billing, like I briefly mentioned it before, an application that adds functionality to NetSuite to handle any type of complex billing scenarios that you might encounter. We have Zone Approvals, which is a very easy plug and play, drag and drop solution to configure complex approval workflows. Zone Reconcile. This can help automate the process of processing your bank statement reports. And Power BI, which is coming from the Satori side of the business, which offers a pre-built integration with BI. All of these, there's a lot of information available on our website, which I'll show at the end. So even though we don't go into a lot of details on them today, feel free to check them out and get in touch with me if you have any question on any of those. But let's zoom in on our applications for today. And I'm going to start with a product demo and a run through of ZoneCapture. And ZoneCapture is our AP automation solution. So in essence, what it does, it adds OCR functionality in NetSuite. OCR stands for optical character recognition, meaning that it can take a PDF document, read out the data from a PDF document, and use that to create transactions in NetSuite. These are some of the main benefits of the application. So obviously it's a native suite app. It includes three-way matching functionality. We've added split screen functionality to the system, and friendly UI, clickable auto learning. I'm going to show you this when I walk you through that application in a moment. Before I do, it's sort of good to explain a little bit how this works. So we automate the creation of vendor bills and vendor credits. So when you receive a PDF of a vendor bill from your supplier, you email that to NetSuite. It's stored in your NetSuite account, and then we utilize a third-party OCR provider, a company called Abby. They read out the data from that PDF. So a little bit about Abby. It's really one of the market leaders when it comes to OCR technology. Like if you look up the OCR Magic Quadrants, they're always listed there as a leader, support virtually any languages out there, and they reach very high recognition rate across all those languages. Once they've captured the data, they send it to NetSuite. The user then reviews what we call a booking recommendation in NetSuite. They can validate then to see if all the data was captured in the right way, maybe add some information where needed, and finally create the bill transaction with that captured data. So let me actually go in and show you that. So you should now be able to see my NetSuite dashboard. And here you can see the ZoneCapture portlet that we've added with our application. And here I can see my incoming queue. So think of it, this is the list of all those transactions that we forwarded to NetSuite that are now ready to be processed. You click on that, and then we come to our sort of the heart of our application here. Here I can see all the transactions that I can start creating. And there's a lot of information here. I want to just highlight a couple of things. First of all, here you can see a status, and the status tells us whether or not we've captured everything that we need to start the creation of this transaction. Here you can see there's also a transaction that came in where we were not able to capture everything we need to start the creation. Now, what we need is subsidiary and supplier, and those values we set automatically. So we look at the captured data, we try to find a matching subsidiary in NetSuite and a matching supplier. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and then we can go into this booking recommendation itself. So if I click on here, you also get a first look at the screen that we created for this application. So here I can see the PDF that came in. I can see the basic information that was captured. I can also see the email with which this was sent. And these screens, as I put on one of the slides earlier, we put a lot of emphasis on user experience. These screens are interactive. So because I have no vendor selected, you see that I also don't have the option here to process. And it tells me why not, that I first have to select the vendor. Now, I could go and search to see if I have that vendor in the system. In this case, I do. I could select it, and then you see that the process option becomes available. You could also create a new vendor straight from here. Now, with everything I'm doing, it's good to know that we always respect the role setup. So if a user doesn't have access to create or doesn't have permission to create a vendor, he also won't be able to do that. Here on vendor create, you see that we also utilize that split screen. You see that we've populated some of the captured data. We could fill in the rest, save the vendor, and go ahead to process. For now, I'm going to go back to my queue, and before I start processing, like a couple of other things that I want to show here, you're able to filter out this data if you want. Another interesting functionality that we offer in this queue is that if I scroll to the right, you see that we're also actively trying to figure out if there's maybe a duplicate entry in this line. So if something was sent to NetSuite twice, you will get a message here saying, hey, this transaction is already listed in this list. If something is sent over and we already find a transaction in the system with the same transaction reference, you also get notified of that straight here in this incoming queue. Let's go ahead and let's process a couple of examples. So it's good to know that we support two different scenarios here. So you can create bills in NetSuite without purchase orders. As you can see, we also have a column here to connect these recommendations to purchase orders, and then it would act as a purchase order bill action. I'm going to start with this example here for clear branding. So I'm just going to hit the process button. And then we're starting our bill creation. There's a couple of things that happen here. So you can see that our split screen functionality pops up. We can see the bill on the left-hand side of the screen. On the right-hand side, we can see the NetSuite transaction. You're able to toggle that on and off. So if you just want to look at the transactional data, you can. But of course, this is really handy to compare the PDF with the captured information. And you can hopefully see that all that information here is filled out, right? So we have the invoice number selected. The system recognizes the currency of the transaction. So it's a multi-currency vendor. And we've selected the GBP based on what we found on the transaction here. If I scroll down, you also see that we have line level recognition. So we have 3 lines on the transaction here, and we have 3 corresponding lines, all with their respective values and descriptions. So in a perfect world, we really would only have to cross-reference this, hit the save button, and in a number of seconds, you would have created a bill transaction. There is some additional functionality that we offer here. So the first one that I want to point out is you can see that these lines are now processed on different expense accounts. We utilize vendor setup for that. So if on the vendor we've selected the default expense account, like on the top lines here, we follow that logic. But you're also able to utilize the captured line level descriptions. So here you see this third line is processed to a different expense account, right? The freight and delivery account. And that we do with a matching rule. So you see that a post matching rule has been selected. If I really quickly open that up and you see what that does, basically there we can define logic like, hey, if that line contains a certain keyword, in this case, the word post, then process it to this particular account, in this case, the freight and delivery expense account. It's good to know that this can be enhanced with any field that you might have available in NetSuite, not just the standard classifications. Final thing that I want to point out here is that it's really easy to map information from the PDF to any field in NetSuite. So here you see that I have a field called demo clickable PDF. I already have some information pre-populated there. If I remove this, you can see that I can simply click on this field and select any value here, and it automatically parses that to that field. This is something that is auto-learning. So if you make that mapping, we store that, and the next time that a bill comes in for this vendor, it will repeat that mapping, which is why we saw that information here before. Now, that's how that works for standalone transactions. So as I mentioned, we also support the billing of purchase orders, and we add a few additional things there that I did want to point out. So if we look at the line here for the notebook producer, I can see that this has been connected to a purchase order. So we go through the incoming bill and we try to find a PO reference. If we find a matching PO in NetSuite, we connect it. If I open up that booking recommendation, you can see that here. So here I can see the purchase order that has been connected. It's good to know that from here, you can select multiple purchase orders, right? So if the vendor is billing us for 2 POs, I can select an additional one. You also see that we get some status information here. So some of these purchase orders are marked orange. That means that we're not able to bill these yet. So they're either pending receipt or they're pending approval. Everything that's green means that it's ready to bill. And if we go ahead and let's go and build this PO, we also have some additional functionality where we actually compare the information of the purchase order with the incoming bill. So if I look at this bill here you see something which is called a validation rule. We have a couple of those available. In this case, we're saying, hey, we want to compare the lines on the PO with the lines on the bill based on an item name or number. And here you see that we use color coding to show the results of that validation. So in the case of the first 3 lines, we were actually able to match those between the incoming invoice and the PO. So those are green, everything as well. But also if there's a mismatch, we highlight this to the user. So if you look at that 4th line here, if I scroll a little bit to the right, we have something called a matching status where we set for this line, this is unbilled, meaning that we found that item on the purchase order, but we did not find it on the invoice. So it was not billed. Therefore, we update the quantity to 0. That's absolutely not a problem. You could just go ahead, create this bill. It would just stay open on the purchase order. But we do highlight that to the user in case they want to chase that with the supplier and see what's happening there. The final piece that I want to mention here is that we also add to the line a reference to the purchase orders that these lines came from, which is not something that standard NetSuite offers. In this case, I'm just billing 1 purchase order, right? So like it doesn't give that much additional information. But if you're billing 10 purchase orders at the same time, it's really handy to be able to see which lines originated on what purchase order. So for ZoneCapture, that's what I wanted to show today. Let's continue with the next app. Also to give a sense of, hey, with that functionality, you can actually cater to completely different use cases. So I wanted to highlight one of the other apps in our portfolio, and that is ZonePayments. And ZonePayments is a native application with which we aim to allow a customer to integrate with multiple payment service providers. So what is a payment service provider? A payment service provider is a company that facilitates online payments, right? So let's say you have a web store, a customer goes through the checkout at some stage, they have to process a payment. You tend to see that companies utilize a third party for that, so that you can offer a host of different payment options. Now, eventually down the line, we want ZonePayments to be a platform that will communicate with multiple payment service providers, but we're going to start out with making it act as an integration with Stripe. So Stripe is one of the fastest growing payment service providers in the world, also in Europe. They have really good technical capabilities as well. So for us, it was a very obvious starting point as a first partner for ZonePayments. And these are some of the main points that we want to achieve with ZonePayments. And I think there's like 2 that I want to highlight here. And the most important one for me is a turnkey integration. So we want this process to be as simple as possible. So no need for long implementation projects, no need for in-between systems. And I'm going to show you that during the product demonstration. Another one I want to highlight here is this easy compliance. So when it comes to payments, when it comes to dealing with credit card information, that's always a very sensitive topic. It's good to know that within the communication that we do with Stripe, we are never storing sensitive credit card information anywhere, not in NetSuite, not in any platform of ours. We just utilize that in the communication with Stripe. That's the only place where it's stored, ensuring that it's fully PCI compliant for our customers. So what does ZonePayments actually add to your system? So what additional functionality does it give you once that's installed? So I try to summarize that in 4 main points. So using ZonePayments, it allows you to enable your customers to pay their invoices online in a variety of different ways. It also automates the refunding process. So when I was working still as an implementation consultant, that was always a topic that came up when customers were working with online payments, that was a cumbersome process. If you wanted to process a refund, usually you had to do something in NetSuite, something in the system of the payment service provider. It was very easy to get difference between those two. That's something that we automate with this application. It allows you to sync payments from Stripe into NetSuite. So payments that do not originate in NetSuite, but that are only existing in Stripe. And we have functionality to fully reconcile everything that's happening. So if you're getting lots of transactions in Stripe and there's a payout at some stage, you get a full reconciliation functionality to show you that on a transactional basis. So let's go ahead and let's see that in action. And the first thing I want to show is really how easy it is with ZonePayments to establish that connection. And I'm going to show you that by starting in my Stripe account. So this is the Stripe interface. And within that Stripe interface, we here have an option for developers and something called an API key. So what is an API key? In essence, think of that as a username and password that Stripe provides that allows external system to communicate with the Stripe application. So this information, if I go into my NetSuite account and I go under setup, you see that here we have some options for zone payment setup. And we have an option here called payment profiles. Now, what this is in essence is, okay, this subsidiary in NetSuite is going to communicate with this particular Stripe account. So if I click on edit here, you see that we have some configuration options available. And here you sort of see those same values as I saw in Stripe, right? These public and this private API key. So all you do is you copy paste those values from Stripe into your NetSuite account. And that's it. That's really all you need. And at that moment, if I would save this record, we would be able to communicate between the two systems. Now you see there are some additional configurations options available here, like some of these we'll touch upon later during the demo. For example, like there might be some people on the like looking at this that are using Stripe already. You might know that in Stripe, if you deal with multiple currencies, you would connect those to different bank accounts, like the euro transactions would be paid out to your euro bank account. We allow you to do specific configurations that as well. So you can say, okay, that needs to tie into this account in NetSuite, and you can configure some additional items here, like think of if there's a fee charged by Stripe, to what GL account should we process that for this particular bank account. Now, because I've entered this, that's really all I need. So we are now able to communicate with Stripe. So let's go ahead and see that in action. So I created a test customer for us, like a relevant, the BrightBridge one. Let's give that a moment to load. And on this BrightBridge customer, I have created some transactions for us. So I'm going to open up an invoice. So open that in a separate tab. And on any invoice that we are now creating, you see that we have this Zone Payments tab available. And under the Zone Payments tab, we are generating a payment link. And that payment link, you can now utilize in a few different ways. So if you are sending these invoices to your customers via email, you could embed that link into the email message. What I've done in my demo account here is if I go ahead and print this invoice, you see that I've actually created a Pay Now link on this invoice transaction. So if a customer would receive this invoice and they would click on Pay Now, it would bring them to our payment page. Now, one thing I want to point out here, you see that I've selected like a certain theme, a certain background, like I'm Dutch, so when I can look at mountains, I always do so. This is fully customizable. So like within NetSuite, we have an option for what we call page themes. There you see that I'm now using the mountain theme. From here, you could create your own themes. You can change the logos you're using, the images. So rest assured that there are some options to really make that look and feel in a way that works for your business. Here we are reverted to the payment page. So because we are triggering this from a transaction, you see that all that information is filled out for that particular transaction. So a customer would really only have to add their credit card details, which I have conveniently prepared, and they would be able to proceed with the payment. Now, I mentioned that there is a couple of different ways in which customers can pay. So this is this single transaction pay, but I also wanted to highlight this here. So you can see that the customer would have the option to save a card for automatic payment. So I'm going to check that, and I'm going to hit the process payment button. Let me also fill in an email address. And what this does is it will actually store an authorization in Stripe that we are allowed to charge the credit card or the payment method of this customer for future transactions. That is also synced and stored into NetSuite, meaning that you can configure logic in NetSuite where you could say, okay, if a customer that has authorized us has an invoice and that invoice is overdue, or any other rules you would like to configure, you could automatically charge the payment method on record for that customer to settle open invoices. Cool, so in this case, I can see that my payment went through. I got a confirmation message here. So if I now go into my Stripe account and I click on payments, you can see that this invoice for 6,806 immediately also now triggered a payment in Stripe, and that payment method has been charged here for the customer. Now that's not all. So we handle that and we make sure that Stripe makes that charge, but also in NetSuite, if I now click refresh on this invoice, you will see that the invoice is now listed as paid in full. If I go to the related records, you can see here that indeed, like a payment transaction has been created. The status of this payment transaction is now listed as non-deposited because it has been charged, but we did not get it paid out yet by Stripe. We'll look at that in a moment. Another so that I've mentioned it is that we store a lot of information around these payments. So here you can see we create a payment activity record where anything related to that transaction, any type of charge ID that you might want to see and use is stored. Now there is one other option that I wanted to show to you guys. So we looked at sort of single transaction pay. We looked at auto pay. Another option that we have is when I go to our customer here, also on the customer record, we have a zone payment tab. And there we have something called a statement link. So I'm going to open that up in a new tab. And a statement link is something with which you can show a customer an overview of all their pending transactions. So you might be generating customer statements from NetSuite. When you provide those to your customers, you can include this link in that email as well. And that will bring them to this particular page. And here you can see that instead of that being for a single transaction, they can see all open transactions in the system, both invoices and credits. The customer could select the transactions that they would want to settle. They could select, for example, 2 invoices and a credit memo that will calculate the balance. And then in the same way as we did before, they can process a payment, which would then create a payment that would be applied against all the transactions that are selected here. So really like a great additional way for customers to settle. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to show. I mentioned talking about crediting and how easy we make that. So I won't demo the full flow of that, like we wouldn't have enough time during the session today, but I want to show the principle of it. So this is the invoice that we just processed. And if I would now want to trigger a refund for that in Stripe, it would really be as simple for me as to go and create a credit memo. So I'll click on the credit button here. And when we create a credit memo in NetSuite, also here, you see we have an additional ZonePayments option. And there we have this checkbox, which is called issue refund. And that's really all I would need to do. So when I create a credit memo, I would say, okay, this credit memo should also trigger a refund creation in Stripe. If I check this box and I save the transaction, it would go ahead and issue that refund in the Stripe environment. So like a really easy, nicely integrated way to do that. 2 additional things, like I mentioned as one of the main points at the beginning, that we can also sync transactions from Stripe into NetSuite. So on the payment profile configuration, you see that we have some options for that. We call it standalone charges. What that means is that we have a payment in Stripe that's not in NetSuite. We can say, hey, bring those into NetSuite as either an invoice, and we will actually create the customer and the invoice in your NetSuite account, or sync that over as a payment. Then we will just create the payment transaction in NetSuite, and that payment transaction can then be applied to the sales transactions that you have in the system. The final piece, I would almost say last but not least, is the payouts. So if I go into my Stripe account, we have here something called balances. And under balances, I can see all the payouts that have been done. So as Stripe goes and collect all those payments, and then once every day, once every week, depending a little bit on your agreement with Stripe, they will pay out those open balances. So this is an example of a payout where we can see all the transactions that are included in the total amount and the fees that Stripe took for those transactions. Now, also these payouts, we sync into NetSuite. So if I go here and I go to my list of bank deposits, we create a matching bank deposit record. So in this case, which one did I open here? I opened here the one for 933. I can see that I have a matching bank deposit record available for that in NetSuite. If I open that up, and I'm gonna open up a payment in a new tab in the meantime, here you can see that reflection in NetSuite. So what we do is we connect all the transactions in NetSuite. The status of those transactions will then be updated. So if I go to the one that I've just opened, you see that the status of this transaction was changed from non-deposited to deposited when we created this bank deposit, meaning that it's really easy to go in and report and see, hey, which of the transactions were actually confirmed to be paid out on our bank account by Stripe. And the final piece that we do here, if I go here, you see that those fees that were mentioned before are also separately processed to the account that we specified within the configuration for that. So also the full reconciliation process is automated. Yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to show for those 2 applications. So a few things I wanted to point out before we go into the Q&A. As mentioned before, these are just 2 examples. We have more applications within our Zone family. Have a look at our website. So Zone&Co.com, there you can find all our applications. You can find further details, explanation videos, contact forms. So if you're interested in any of those applications, you can reach out directly from there. Alternatively, this is our email address, so sweetapps@zoneandco.com. Any query you have, forward that to that email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and I would be more than happy to help you with any query. So with that, I'll give the word to you, Ryan, and maybe there are some questions on anything I've shown from the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jurian. That's a really great presentation. So we have questions on both ZoneCapture and ZonePayments. So I'll split it up for you to make it a bit easier. So we'll start off with the ones on ZoneCapture. Yeah. So the first question is, what languages are supported in ZoneCapture?
A lot. So like our OCR engine is Abby. They support over 200 languages. What I can do, maybe we can even include that in the follow-up we send after the session. They have a very nice page where you can see exactly what languages are supported. I'll make sure that we get that to the people attending today.
That's perfect, thank you. What is the recognition rate of the OCR solution?
Yeah, so it always, because it's still OCR technology, it always depends on a number of factors, right? If it's a handwritten bill that's not really well structured, it will give the tool more issues. If it's a well-structured bill, if it's in sort of a more common language for Abby, the recognition rates are really high. So we get into the high 90s when it comes to recognition percentage.
Perfect. Does ZoneCapture also support other documents like purchase orders or sales orders?
Yeah, good question. I would say at the moment not. So at the moment, it's really focused to be an AP automation tool. So we only support those transaction types. It is in our vision. So eventually, we would really like this tool to become broader. We get this request quite often. We want to extend that also to cover additional transaction types down the line. Right now, it really supports vendor bills, vendor credits.
Oh, perfect. That's an interesting question, actually. Do you have to manually process every bill that goes through ZoneCapture, or will it automatically process them if there are no mismatches?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I actually forgot to mention that during my demo. There is an option for auto processing. So on a vendor level, if you're happy with sort of the settings of a vendor, if that recognition goes well, you can mark a supplier for auto processing, and then any transaction that comes in will automatically be processed into a bill transaction. You won't have to manually go through that processing motion. You'll always be able to still sort of see if it was processed automatically, yes or no. So if you would want to reroute it for slightly different approval, you would have the option to do that.
Brilliant. Next question, so is a bill approval flow part of ZoneCapture?
No, it's not the standard part of that application. We do have a solution for it. So I briefly alluded to that when I sort of showed all those apps. We have an app called Zone Approvals. That's what you would utilize. So you could utilize that for bill approval flows. You can utilize it for also other transactions, but we would use that app if you're in the need for an approval flow and you have not set it up with standard NetSuite functionality.
Okay. We're moving on to more of the ZonePayment side now. So can you embed the payment pages into our company websites so to make sure that the customer experience is seamless between the two?
No, at the moment, that's not yet the scope of it. Like if you look at the payment page that we presented, that's really aimed at allowing sort of payments to flow into transactions that originated in NetSuite. There are some flows designs that we can make in that situation. That's probably a little bit too complex to explain on the session today. But I'll be more than happy to follow up with sort of the person who asked that question, so I can give a little bit more details on how that would work.
course, we can always loop in a call for them after from that. So does Stripe support 3D Secure?
Yeah, as far I would have to say, as far as I know, it does. But let me double check it and get back to the person who asked that question. But yeah, as far as I know, it does support it.
What other payment merchants will you support in the future with ZonePayments?
So the honest answer to that is that at the moment, I don't know yet. Like we're really launching it, focusing on Stripe. What we will do, as we do with all our applications, we're talking to all our customers, we're talking to customers who are using it now for Stripe, and we're trying to create a picture of, hey, where is most a month, and then make a plan of which ones we will support next and in what order. I don't have that concrete at the moment. Follow us on social media, because as soon as we have that information to share, we'll make sure that we'll post it there.
Perfect. This quite nicely links into the next question, really. So what is your future release program / strategy? As it's a new app, I imagine there are a lot of bugs to work out.
Yeah, and that's similar. That's sort of similar with all our applications. Like we constantly work on improving them. So like all of our apps get new releases. Like we have around 4 to 6 new releases for all our applications that really adds new functionality to those applications. And in between that, we also always push sort of hot fixes. So if we run into anything unexpectedly, we always have a way to tackle this as well on the fly. Also, rest assured, by the way, we've been doing this since 2012. We have a lot of experience with developing these applications. So when we launch them, they tend to be pretty good and stable from the get-go.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly, obviously the payment side is new. Scan and Capture has been around for quite a while now. Obviously, Fast4 was acquired by Zone&Co.
Yeah, absolutely. ZoneCapture launched in 2016. So yeah, getting close to our 7-year anniversary.
So final question is, when supplier is marked to auto-process the bills, so capture, will it halt the processing if it doesn't match up with the PO in NetSuite?
At the moment, that's not yet part of the functionality. No, so that is something we're looking at, but at the moment, that's not yet part of that functionality. The PO billing you would have to process without the auto processing.
Perfect. So if there aren't any other questions, that wraps us up for today. Thanks very much, everybody, for your time. Really appreciate it. And anyone who wants to follow up, do just give us a shout. And as I say, with some of the questions, we will follow back to you with a personal email with once we've got the clarification around, for example, the 3D Secure side. So thanks very much, everyone, for taking the time to attend our webinar today. If you have any further questions, or would like to have a more bespoke demonstration, just drop me an email at ryan.harris@brightbridgesolutions.com and we can get this arranged for you. The next webinar in our series is at 10 o'clock on the 16th of February with he's one of our end user customers who will be talking to us about how to test for the next release. So thanks again for attending today and look forward to seeing you all again soon. And thanks very much, Jurian, for a great session.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Ryan. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. All the best. Bye-bye.